Hi there, everyone. This is Lorna Taylor. I am the Associate Vice Chancellor for Curriculum and Academic Operations at Daymar College. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about overcoming objections with students. I initially structured this training for PDs, and I think this is something that we can all use, student services, PDs, DOEs, just to try and format a better structure for addressing student objections to continuing school, overcoming obstacles for students, so that we're providing the right tools for students to move forward in their degree. We know they all came to us for a reason. They all signed up for school, went through that process, started classes. And while we know we may not be able to save every single student, going through this process should assist in addressing some of those concerns that students have head on, so that we can work on those issues with them to help them continue school and achieve the goals that they set out to achieve. So to begin, I want to go ahead and share my screen with you. I have a PowerPoint that I am going to share with you. Okay. So overcoming student objections, one of the first things that you need to do, and this is not quite to step one yet, but in order to do any of these steps, you really need to build a library of resources to combat student objections. You need to have the right toolkit. You need to have the right resources for students to access to say, hey, we have resources available. We know of resources that can help you in this particular area. Otherwise, all of that, overcoming objections a lot of times will be for naught. So we want to make sure you have a robust library of resources available, local resources, community resources, online resources, things that students can utilize, that they can access to assist with certain areas, whether that be childcare, counseling, housing, food, work, or even if it's, some academic issues, if there's something in class that they're struggling with, making sure that you have available to them the right resources for tutoring, for support. All of that is critical. And trying to develop relationships with those resources is important as well. So if you have a particular, resource that you use for counseling or childcare or for, work resources, employment resources, get to know, those resources well, develop relationships, because it can make all the difference if you can provide a student with a warm transfer to that resource and you get to know that resource, following up, supporting that student, letting them know, hey, I know these folks, you can work with them. I've worked with them before, they're very reliable. That can make the difference. And just not sending them to, a website blindly to utilize a resource, being able to warm transfer them can make a big difference. So also getting that student face-to-face. So again, before you go into any of the steps of overcoming objections, getting that student face-to-face, your success rate will increase significantly. Now, we all know that that's not always possible. I wish it was. So certainly going through these steps over the phone, even via email if you have to, all of those things via text, it's still possible, but getting that student face-to-face makes a big difference. Also, we know that when a student is struggling with, time management, with issues happening outside of school, sometimes a schedule change or dropping a class, things like that can be an alternative to just dropping school altogether. And sometimes students have that mentality of it's all or nothing. It's much better to get something than to get nothing. But in order to drop a class, in order to do those things, they need to talk with financial aid. In order to look for new job opportunities, they may need to touch base with career services. And those on-campus warm transfers are sometimes easier when that student is face-to-face with you if you're a ground campus, so that you can walk the student over there, explain what's happening, and allow them to work with financial aid to see if there are any academic ramifications or financial ramifications to dropping a class, working with you on the academic ramifications, or their advisor or their PD. But certainly, working with that student hand-in-hand, face-to-face can make a big difference. So anytime you can, it's great. So the first step in trying to overcome student objections. If they're telling you, gosh, I'm just struggling so much with this particular issue, that it's making me feel like I can't continue school. I'm just not sure if I can move forward because I've got all this going on. We hear that a lot, I know. And I think a lot of times, especially those of us that have been doing it for a while, it's easy just to jump in and say, no, we've got a solution for you. Wait. No, don't, leaving school, don't think about dropping classes. It's easy to do because we know half the time what the student's going to say. We've heard it all before, right? But remaining silent and listening initially is really, really important. So it sends the student the message that they are important, that what's happening in their life is important to us, that we value them as a student, we value them as a person and their well-being, and we want to know exactly what's going on so that we can try and provide the right resources issue. If you are face-to-face with that student, demonstrating active listening skills, leaning in, nodding, affirming what they're saying. And the same thing goes if they're on the phone. If you're an online student services coordinator, an instructor, a PD, letting the student know that you're listening. Yes, okay, yep, okay. Letting them know as you're listening that yes, you are actively listening to them. So they're not going, hello, is anyone there? It's important. But it gives you time to think, and sometimes gives the student time to explain what's happening so you know how you can overcome that objection. And thinking is a good thing. So, being able to really assess what's happening, and sometimes I'd say more often than not, there's more than just one issue happening, and it takes time and patience to really sort of peel the onion on what's happening and figure out how we can best address each particular objection, and let them know that we're taking that seriously. So the second step is to gather information. So taking notes while you're listening, you may ask questions, can you tell me more about this? Can you explain this to me? That way the student knows that you really do want more information. But you might want to avoid asking why questions, because sometimes that can just give the student an opportunity to go back and sort of go back into all of their objections. And what you want to do is start peeling back the pieces, working with them so you can get to the root of it, to start going through some of the other steps in resolving that objection. But it does show how much you care, that you want to understand the details by taking notes, by clarifying. So that's step 3, is checking for understanding. So again, clarifying that what you're hearing from the student is correct, because sometimes what they say and what they mean can be two different things. Sometimes we're hearing a lot of different objections, and so one in particular may be what they're really worried about, even though they're talking about 10 things. So if we can clarify, then we can be sure again that moving forward we're addressing the proper objections so we can effectively work through the process. So clarification is important. You can say things like, so what you're saying is, so what I'm hearing you say is blah, 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 that childcare is a real concern for you right now. And unless you find childcare right away, you won't be able to come to your classes. And again, sometimes that offers you an opportunity to work through some of these other steps. Maybe it will take a little while to resolve childcare issues, but maybe the student doesn't know that, they could be working on their assignments and still completing their assignments in Canvas. Not that that's what we want them to do. In all cases, we certainly want them to be in class. But again, if we're looking at alternatives to leaving school altogether or dropping a number of classes, those kinds of things, dropping a class entirely, just kind of assessing what the best academic plan is for that student and what options are best. So trial close, that's a term that we use in sales when you're looking at overcoming objections, but we can also use it with the student. And that is, if I could help you find a resource for childcare, would you be able to move forward with your courses? So it's giving you the opportunity to say, if I could find a resolution for this particular objection, would you move forward? If we could help find you a part-time job to pay for some of those bills, would you still move forward with classes? if we could look at dropping one out of your 4 classes, would that allow you to focus on those other 3 and have time to move forward in those 3 classes? Things like that. Now, I'm not suggesting that, we always, use the option with a student of dropping classes. We don't want that to be the alternative, but we do want to try and explore any and every option for the student so that they're not having to completely give up school, walk away, a lot of times with debt that they can't yet pay back because they haven't finished their degree. So we don't want that. We want to find alternatives. And sometimes if we can do a trial close, either they will say yes and great, we can move forward resolving that particular objection, or they'll say no. And that's okay, because then we know, okay, there's more that we need to get to the root of to find out how we need to resolve this. And again, not every single situation will we be able to resolve, but we certainly, through a good library of resources, can have a lot of options for that student. And sometimes students are throwing up objections like childcare is my main issue. But if you can resolve that and you've got the resources for that, sometimes that takes that away as an excuse and puts the focus back on the student's academic performance. So maybe they're really insecure about their classes. Maybe they know they're behind and they're using childcare as a smokescreen so that they don't want to move forward because they know they need to get caught up on work. So sometimes that allows you to kind of sift through that smokescreen and figure out what really is the issue so you can get to the root of that and resolve it. Step 5, so handling the objection. So now that you've identified, okay, if I could help you with this, would that allow you to move forward? Providing the resource for that issue at hand is the key to handling the objection, making sure to act as an advocate for the student to assist in resolving the issue. So, a couple ways you can do that is reassuring the student that, hey, I'm going to reach out to your instructors. I'm going to act as your advocate, but this is a two-way street. If I'm going to do that, I need you to do your part, and we're going to put together an academic plan. I need you to know that I'm sticking my neck out for you. I need you to do the work. So I need you to follow up on the childcare resources. I need you to follow up on completing the assignments within the structure of the plan that we put together. I need you to make sure that you're following up with me each week to let me know how things are going. Or I'm going to set you up for tutoring. I need you to be sure that you're showing up to that tutoring on time. I'm going to make sure someone's here to help you, but I need you to be there too. So putting some of that ownership on the student that, hey, I'm going to utilize these resources to help you, but I need you to be, me responsible for making sure that you're making it happen as well. We'll work together as a team. And letting the student know that you're on their team. Sometimes it's, they're used to an educational setting where if you're not there, if you're not doing the work, you're in trouble, and there's no coming back. So we want them to know that we really are their advocates. We know life happens. We want to help them with the plan. We want them to do what they need to do, but we are here to act as their advocate, as a support. A lot of times they don't have that support at home. So we want them to know that we're here for them and we're going to work with them hand in hand. So providing that warm transfer that we talked about earlier can make a difference. And then following up with that student after the fact to make sure they are in fact following through with the steps that you mentioned. So checking student satisfaction. So this also is part of, what you would do with a client in overcoming objections in sales, but with a student, really what we're doing is, trying to find out whether or not we have in fact resolved the issue for that student. So I provided childcare resources for you. Now you've got those. We've taken a look at an academic plan. Do you feel like you are ready to move forward? Did we handle that to your satisfaction? Do you feel like that resolved kind of some of those worries that were happening in your mind about whether you could move forward with school? If the answer is yes, fantastic. So you've worked through the steps and you've resolved that particular objection. It's still going to be work on the back end to follow up and make sure that they're still working through that process. But if the answer is no, again, no is never, sort of like we say with our accreditors, no is not a negative action, right? It's not a negative action. It's just giving you an opportunity to get back to some of those prior steps, go through the previous steps, revisit them, and find out what's really going on. So you told me childcare was the biggest issue. We talked about that. You confirmed that. I got you resources for childcare, and we talked about an academic plan to resolve things. But now you're telling me no, that you still don't feel like you can move forward. So tell me what's really going on. Tell me more about what else is happening so that we can find out what type of support you need and what I can provide. That's important. So then continuing the discussion can be important. In step 7, ask the student, are you ready to move forward now? So again, that confirmation, saying, like you would say if you were selling an item, hey, so are you ready to purchase now that we've resolved that objection? Are you ready to move forward with classes now that we've resolved that? And again, no is not a negative. It just means that you need to go back to some of those prior pieces. Now, here is the step where it's really important to make a plan. So making sure that you have developed both a written academic plan and a verbal plan for resources and follow-up. It's so important. So if the student doesn't have written down piece by piece what they need to do, so whether that's going through Canvas and identifying what assignments they need, working with their program director and instructors to make sure you know specifically exactly what assignments need to be completed for that student to get caught up, and coming up with a time breakdown of when they need to get those done. Because we know, the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And if the student knows they're far behind, they need to get caught back up, and they've already got outside issues going on, the minute they walk out of that office and tell you they're going to move forward, if there's not a plan in place, you can almost guarantee that that student's going to hop right back onto your LDA, hop right back into that at-risk bucket, because they are not going to feel that they can get back on track. They're going to get into Canvas that night or start working on those assignments, and with everything else going on, before they know it, they're going to be overwhelmed again, throwing their hands up and saying, hey, I don't think I can do this, and we don't want that. So making sure you're coming up with that plan, again, reaching out to instructors, helping them manage their time, ideally setting up time for them to work with someone on a regular basis, whether that's an advisor, someone in the LRC, an instructor, someone that can touch base with them regularly throughout the week as they work through that plan, to make sure that they're getting things done and they're on track. And giving them that encouragement that, hey, you can do this. You're doing a good job. You're knocking things off the list. Keep up the good work, just to keep, encouraging them with that momentum to get everything done. And making sure they're welcomed into classes with open arms. I know sometimes that seems like, oh, well, that would be obvious if you're reaching out to the instructors. But we know sometimes that, as instructors, if a student has been out for a while, we've got a whole class, that is on a certain chapter, and we've got a student that comes in and they're behind, and we know they're behind, and maybe we've been reaching out to that student and we couldn't get in touch with them. We don't understand why they weren't returning our calls. It's easy to be frustrated when that student returns to class and say, gosh, if only you'd return my calls, and now you want my help getting caught back up. But sometimes we forget that the student can have issues going on outside of school. Sometimes they're embarrassed to talk to us. Sometimes they feel like they're so far behind that we're going to be angry. We're going to be frustrated they're behind. They don't want to talk about their personal issues. So again, as administrators, as program directors, as directors of education, student services, reaching out to those instructors and just kind of, letting them know, hey, this student really did have something going on and they finally opened up to us. So I want to make sure we're doing everything we can to support them. Having a smiling face when they go back into that classroom, again, can make all the difference. Letting them know, hey, again, we're on your team. We want to see you succeed. Let's find a way to get you there. And then continuing to follow up after that. So there are a lot of pieces that go along with overcoming objections for students. But I think if we follow those steps, sometimes it's easy to skip the steps, and that's when we get sort of what I call a false close, which means the student says, oh yeah, okay, I'll move forward. And then again, like I said, next thing you know, they're right back into, the LDA, onto the LDA. They're right back into the at-risk bucket because they are not working through their academic plan, if there was one, or they are not reaching out to those resources. They are not following through with what they need to do to get back on track. So we just want to be sure we're following each one of these steps to really get to the root of the problem or problems, and finding any solutions we can for those issues, and certainly coming up with that academic plan, because sometimes it really is more about sort of that insecurity with academics more than it is all of those other life issues that were happening, because a lot of times those life issues were happening before they got into school, and they knew they were happening before they got into school. Now, whether they realized the impact they would have on their academic progress, it's hard to say, but sometimes those things are overcomeable. It's that in combination with their concern or insecurity about their academic performance that can cause the real struggle. So if we can really address both of those things head on, it can help us to retain our students, find solutions for them, and support them, and in the end, ideally increase student satisfaction, because those students are staying, we're increasing retention, but they also know that we're on their team and they feel like we really have the resources they need to move forward successfully. So any questions that you have, you can always email me at lataylor, Taylor, at daymarcollege.edu, and we will have more trainings to come. Thanks so much.